And basically what I wanted to hear from you is your opinion, and share with my audience also your opinion on how things are going to work in the Q4 regarding this whole inventory changes. They are tightening the grip for Amazon sellers. Performing the API index minimum 500 threshold is going to be pretty hard to achieve for some people that are sourcing from China, India, and all that. So just kind of like wanted to hear your advice, how people should behave in this case in the best possible way for them to be profitable. Obviously, you're the subject matter expert on this topic that affects us all, including PPC campaigns that we manage and all the things, a lot of changes. So that's what I wanted to hear. So whenever you're ready, we can get started.
Yeah, first of all, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to share my knowledge and my expectations and thoughts with you. IPI has always been a very baffling parameter that Amazon has put out. It's extremely secretive. You don't really know what is going on in there. They gave out some explanations, but they don't explain how this is calculated. And looking at the way IPI reacts to data, I'm sorry about people in my background. Looking at, it's really funny, this in background. Looking at the way at the Amazon IPI reacts to changes in the data is not consistent with the explanations Amazon has given. Amazon says that IPI is a 3-month moving average calculation based on specific parameters. But then as you slowly improve your inventory status, which it's not a fast thing to do other than pulling out inventory and fixing stranded inventory, both of those are fast. The other things take time. And you have a slowly improving inventory, and you come in and look at your RPI and it jumped 20 points 1 week. Why? Don't know. Something happened 3 months ago. You don't even remember what it was. You don't know what it was. So IPI is an extremely confusing parameter that Amazon set out to try and force sellers to change their behavior. Basically, when Amazon started operating the FBA centers, the Fulfillment by Amazon Logistical Centers, they were planning one thing, but people started doing another thing, and those centers became huge storage warehouses. People knew how to work the system to get a year's worth of free storage in Amazon. At the end of 12 months, and it wasn't even that, they would do their calculations twice a year at a fixed date. So if you brought in inventory in February, you had almost 18 months before you started paying excess storage fees. And the basic storage fees are very low, so it was actually free storage.
Yep.
Eventually, Amazon figured out what they did and then drastically changed it to something totally different. But they're trying to force people to behave in certain ways. It's like a king, I'm sorry, I don't have a better example. It's like a king saying, okay, I want all my subjects to pay me taxes, or I want all my subjects to be happy tomorrow. Why? Because that's what I want. So Amazon thinks they're the king and they decide for their sellers. It's not true. The sellers will always find the best way for them. All business operations, all business interactions are like water flowing. If the water hits a place that is too rocky and it can't flow through, it will float around. We will always find a workaround. We will always find the thing the company didn't think about, the thing Amazon didn't think about to work around it. Somebody will do it. It will be black hat at first, then they'll figure out how to do it gray hat, and eventually it'll be white hat. But there's always ways to work the system. I just don't like it because it's a lot of energy for very little results. Why do you want to have a ton of inventory sitting in Amazon for 18 months? You don't want that. You want to sell your inventory, flow it, turn it again and again and again and again. So basically, Amazon wants something that's good for us sellers. They want us to move our inventory fast through their logistical centers, sell it, bring in more of what is selling well, hold less of what is selling not so well, and basically balance your inventory in the Amazon logistical centers. That will allow you to have high IPI scores and not need them, because as you're flowing inventory, your IPI score doesn't matter anymore. Even if you have limitations, it doesn't matter, because all these limitations are um, they're not aggregative.
Mm-hmm.
They're per the moment. So if I don't have a good IPI coming into fourth quarter and I have a limit,
Yeah.
and let's say my limit is 25 square cubic feet, and right now I have 24 cubic feet, I can send a full cubic foot to Amazon even though I have a limit. As you flow your inventory through the Amazon logistical centers, so you have a limit, it's less comfortable, but you can still send in inventory, you can still keep your sales.
Mm-hmm.
That's shouldn't be a problem at all. So having a limit is not the end of the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what you're saying basically is the generally speaking, you can keep your business flowing and liquid and profitable as long as you are more diligent about how you manage your inventory, in terms of being it divided into smaller pieces rather than just sending a whole batch that will last for the whole quarter. That's how it's going to
Yes,
work moving forward.
it should. That's what Amazon is looking for. And
Mm-hmm.
it's much healthier for you as a seller as well.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have control over your inventory when it's in Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Very little things can get you stuck for weeks and months. Amazon decided to rebalance your inventory because they had too much in Texas and not enough in,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, uh, Colorado. And now half of your inventory has gone to move between their logistical centers, and for a week, it's not really available. You don't know if it's coming or going, and they will allow it to sell. They will show it as sellable, but you can't manage it. It's in limbo for a week, two. I've had a seller whose inventory moved from being regular to being hazardous.
Mm-hmm.
Now the warehouses, the Amazon FBA logistical centers for regular and hazardous for his materials were one next to the other. It took them 2 months to make the move. It's a difficult system.
Mm-hmm.
The more inventory you control, the easier you can work the system. So they changed your criteria. They said you can no longer be in the regular warehouse. You have to be in the hazardous material warehouse. Okay, send in new inventory until they figure out your old inventory. If all your inventory is in Amazon, you are counting on Amazon to do right by you. You have given up all your control.
Mm-hmm. Has this proven to be a bad practice in your experience during this coronavirus period? How are things doing on the inventory side?
Well, we've seen everything and anything happen. Amazon's logistical centers got clogged up. They shifted their attention to material, to the things that are more relevant to people during the start of the lockdown. So they focused on food and hygiene. And if you were selling something people wanted, but wasn't in those categories, entertainment for kids wasn't a high priority item.
Mm-hmm.
Your shipping time, even if you had inventory in Amazon, the shipping time for Prime members, for regular members, went through the roof.
Yeah.
So your sales were impacted because Amazon didn't live up to its own standard of service on some items.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if you had the ability at the same time to say, okay, Amazon, I'll do fulfillment by merchant for the next 3 weeks whilst you're working to save the world from Corona. Kudos for you, but I need to sell my stuff.
Right.
I'm not very familiar with the Amazon logistical back end. How can you do that? You have to talk with an Amazon expert. Maybe you have to talk with your representative in Amazon, with your agency, to make sure that you know how to set this up. You have to make it available for people to make the decision, for your clients to make the decision. Do I want to wait for Amazon to do this distribution process, and it's longer now because of Corona, or am I going to trust the fulfillment center from the supplier and get it faster in a different way? But if you can combine these things, you can always get the best of all worlds.
Is there a way, sorry to interrupt, is there a way to do this profitably?
Of course. I can't give you a cookie cutter because every situation is different. If you already have a distribution center doing your and last mile logistics, doing your shipments for a Shopify website, for example, having them do your Amazon shipments for a period of time is a no-brainer. If you now have to do it on your own, but you're in lockdown at home, it's hard, it's complex, but it might be profitable. The way to check this is to do your numbers. And we don't have to do the entire annual profit and loss calculation. It's because we're comparing two different options on the same time frame that have the same parameters. So you just compare those two. I will make more money here, but pay Amazon more there, or I have to pay shipment. What is it that you are adding? How many sales do you think you'll get through this? What are the differential profits and differential costs? So if you're doing FBM and you're not paying Amazon its processing fee, that's on the plus side, but you are paying a 3PL. Subtract that and figure out, are you going to make more money or less? The most important thing is making more sales, profitably, of course. But if Amazon's prime shipment going from 2 days to 2 weeks is reducing your sales, even if you can't get all of them because you're going to charge shipping, but you're going to do it in a 3 or 5 day response time, and you'll get half of those sales back, that will probably be profitable.
Interesting. Do you have any feedback from sellers that currently are negotiating rates with third-party suppliers? Because we've heard that some of them complain that prices have gone up, especially in the USA.
No, I've had no experience with that recently.
Okay. If someone does know, please write it in the comment section. We'd love to hear the feedback.
That's very interesting. As a 3PL, or if I was talking to the 3PLs, yes, there is an opportunity right now to squeeze the lemon dry and increase your profits. But the seller 3PL relationship is a long-term relationship. And in the long-term relationship, we don't beat people up when they're down. We don't beat our partners when they're down. They don't forget easily. This is not going to be forgotten easily. If a 3PL is turning on customers or even potential customers and spiking prices up, once this crisis is over and Corona will be over. I don't know when, I'm not a doctor, but it will be over. It's an illness. Humanity went through horrible illnesses, horrible pandemics in the past. And we are here and they are not. So that's where it's going. And when this is over, a 3PL supplier that was trying to abuse the situation to his profitability and I'm sorry, I'm lost for us for a minute here, and hurt his clients and gave unrealistic prices to prospects, we'll find that the competition is still there when the world comes back. And people will leave him for the competition that will give them better prices. If you suck the profitability out of somebody, he will always be looking for a way to make a buck elsewhere. And the business will never be a good, stable relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Now, working together is a win-win situation, always has more to offer both sides than a win-lose situation. So yeah, you can get a short-term win and increase your profitability for a few months as you squeeze a business that is in dire straits, in a problem, in bind.
Mm-hmm.
But in the long run, your lifetime value from that client, your business relations, your ability to get referrals, everything will be diminished and you will make less money.
Hopefully they can see that.
Yes.
Do you have some tips for that faster inventory management you mentioned before? Like, what are some of the ways how you can gain better control of your inventory that's spread across both FBA and third-party logistics warehouse?
Well, the first thing that I always recommend after making sure that you really know your situation,
Mm-hmm.
and this goes down to doing a SKU by SKU analysis, understanding where do you have excess, where do you have shortages, what kind of excess, what kind of shortage. You really have to know where you're standing, and everybody knows to some extent. Intuitively, we always know which item is our best seller, which item is not doing so well, but drill down even deeper. What have you done with those items? What has worked? What hasn't worked? What can be learned from one item to the other, etc. But those are general everyday tips that I give. In order to manage this very quick inventory flow, first of all, if you're doing big shipments from anywhere, if you're buying in bulk
Mm-hmm.
and you're not selling that fast, use an external warehouse. Don't let Amazon have control over that. Yes, it's an additional expense, but Amazon can get very costly very fast. Whereas with the 3PLs, the cost structure is much more stable. And drip feed Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is Amazon recommendations sometimes are spot on and sometimes they make no sense at all. If you want to use Amazon recommendations, see that you're only using the ones that you can explain to yourself. Oh, I've been selling 50 units a week of this SKU and I have 10 units. I want to cover the next 2 weeks, so I need 80 to 100 units. That makes sense to me. But if Amazon says you need 200 more units, that doesn't make sense to you. So don't trust Amazon blindly. They say themselves, they don't know your seasonality, they don't know what you're planning to do with marketing. You have to add in your intuition and your viewpoint. And the last thing, and I think this is the easiest and most important thing, is make smaller, faster decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look now and say, okay, Q4. Q4 is 3 months and it's at least 2 months away from us. That's a huge decision. Do this kind of decision making at least once a week, preferably more. If you're using an external 3PL and drip feeding Amazon, you can make 3 decisions per week on each SKU. Check it on Monday, figure out if you need to send a little more, and don't try to fill in Amazon for 3 weeks because you're drip feeding them. Send them inventory for 4 days, and another 4 days, and
Mhm.
another 4 days, and another 4 days. Now, remember, yes, in Q4, Amazon is notoriously slower. So you do need to build up a bit more of a buffer
Mhm.
in Amazon, but you don't have to feed them this kind of big chunk all the time. So I'd say start with 2 weeks of inventory, for example, or we're not sure what's going to happen. Let's be on the safe side. Let's go for 4 weeks of inventory.
Mhm.
And now I'm coming into the office on Monday. I'm looking at my situation, and they don't have enough for 4 weeks. But all I need to do is send another 3 days of inventory to fill up that 4 weeks. And then 2 days later, I'll probably send another 2 days of inventory of sales. Basically, you're looking at your sales rate. Add in, of course, your intuition and your knowledge about how it's going to increase over the quarter as sales season comes in and
Mhm.
the holiday season comes in. But try to flow the inventory in small frequency shipments. And yes, Amazon may lag back on some of them. But if you have a big enough starting buffer, it will balance out that fluctuation.
Mhm. And
And
how does
you're always in a good chance of having some of your inventory get into a sellable position if
Mhm.
you're flowing. If you send a big chunk and today was a bad day and a machine broke down and somebody made a mistake and the entire logistical center just stopped for 3 hours and then something happened, 2 weeks your inventory is nowhere to be found. If you send them a little by little, every few days you send another, and one of those shipments hits a bad day, and 2 weeks it's nowhere to be found. 3 days later they get a new shipment. Maybe that's a good day.
Mhm. Mhm. And how does this affect forecasting in the inventory planning?
It doesn't.
Mhm.
Those are two separate things. You need to have a forecast. Um, I always tell people you need to know your forecast is wrong, and it's nothing wrong with you, and it's nothing wrong with the forecast.
Mhm.
It's in the future and things can happen. So basically, our forecasts aren't correct.
Mhm.
There are ways to make them more robust. There are ways to make them somewhat more correct, but the best way, but the real question isn't was my forecast right or wrong, it's do I have the things I need to sell? And if I have them, I don't really care what my forecast was. And floating your inventory like this, flowing your inventory means that if the decision you made today turns out 2 days from now to be wrong, you have another decision to make and you can fix it a little bit. So if I sent too much, I'll send less. Or maybe I'll skip a send day. If I sent too little, the demand is spiking far faster than I expected, I'll just send more.
Mhm.
And the last thing that happens when you flow your inventory like that is that you have a better standing when you contact Amazon. Now, we all know that Amazon doesn't really negotiate with sellers, but they also have a very, very keen sense of self-interest. If they will do something for you that will help them, you have a better chance of getting that done.
Mhm.
So if you have, for example, an IPI limit, and that item is doing amazingly well, and the limit is actually limiting you. I know I said it won't, but
Mhm.
you're flowing your inventory and you're doing everything, but demand has spiked so much that you just need to send more each and every time. You have a case to call them up, to call your Amazon representative and say, listen, I can sell more. This is going to flow. Here are the numbers. Here are the proof. Here's the proof. What can be done? Because you'll make more money that way.
Mhm. And I hear some sellers complaining that they don't have that they don't have a rep in Amazon and don't have anyone to talk to. How can we overcome this obstacle?
Well, not everybody can have a sales rep. Of course, we have so many sellers and so many small sellers. There are two ways to overcome this. One is to become a big seller, which will take time and perseverance. The other is to join forces with other sellers, and you probably can do that. The easiest way is through an agency. An agency that represents several sellers can get a representative to talk to them, even if they are not officially allotted a representative. One of their sellers will have a representative, and they can do something through them. And when you're looking for an agency, that's one of the things to ask them. If you're currently not getting this kind of service from Amazon, can the agency fill that up for you?
Good advice. Also, I wanted to ask you, in case that there's a second wave, a lot of people are mentioning that there could be possibly a second wave of coronavirus. What do you foresee as some of the main issues with inventory management in the future? Possible issues?
Well, I think the first wave has already created so much impact, and even if as humanity we get over this pandemic, inventory logistics are going to fill that second wave big time. One of the things I saw is that after China came back online and the factories were given the green light to start manufacturing again, a lot of them shut down because they just didn't have enough bulk of orders. So, and a lot of sellers were then saying, you know what, I don't like this instability. I don't like the fact that I can't count on my suppliers. And I would rather source closer to home. I would rather source with somebody who's more predictable and more communicative. And that is going to have a big impact. Things are simmering down, and a lot of people will just go back to the way they were, but not everybody. And it is going to create a change. If we have that second wave globally, where the world already almost shuts down again, it's a good time actually to start negotiating better cooperation with your suppliers. So I'm not looking for better terms. Just like I said about the 3PLs, trying to win over their loss will always cause a long-term loss. So this is a good time to open communication channels even better and to think about, how do you want to work with your suppliers? What kind of communication do you really want? Are you willing to work with a supplier that doesn't communicate well? That doesn't understand you, that you don't understand them? Or this is a good time to invest in your infrastructure, in figuring out your financial models, your strategy. A lot of people come into Amazon because they heard it's a good way to make money, and maybe they're very passionate about their brand or their product, but they don't have a business plan. And ask them, so what's your goal? The goal is to make a lot of money. There are a lot of ways to make a lot of money. Are you going to buy a business and flip it? Are you going to build a business from scratch? Are you going to use an existing product or get a new product that you developed? Each one of these strategies defines a totally different path to the same goal of make a lot of money. And how much is a lot of money? And how much are you willing to work for that lot of money? And what is a lot of money? Is that 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure sales? Or is that the profit you see in your P&L? Or is that the money you see in your bank account at the end of each month? Because those are 3 different numbers. And if you do the math, you actually find out that some sellers at the verge of the 7-figure sales can only take home less than what they would get if they were flipping burgers at McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to invest in inventory, and that does not show up in your P&L as money out of your pocket, but you have to pay for it somehow. And I'm sorry, that's so funny, the people behind me. And then if you say, okay, on an average, normal seller that's doing pretty well will make about a 10% profit on the revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So you sell $1 million, your profit and loss will show about $100,000 in profit. That same average seller also has about the same amount of money in inventory. So you have $100,000 in profit, but you have already invested $100,000 in inventory. So you basically have zero.
Mm-hmm.
So if you started Amazon because you wanted freedom, because you wanted to be free from a 9-to-5, well, first of all, you took it 24/7, so I don't know why that is better, but still, maybe you just don't want more money. Then you do have to make more money than you would at a 9-to-5, not just in the P&L, which is taxable then, but actually in your bank account.
Mm-hmm. Interesting point. Do you have any other advice for sellers that are now preparing for the Q4 this season?
Yeah, run what if scenarios. Now, it's not easy, and I'm sorry, I'm the only person I know who can do this for you, so contact me. Sorry for the plug, but the best way to make decisions is not to sense the wind or think, or not even the mathematical model that does some kind of P&L.
Mm-hmm.
You actually have to run some kind of simulation that says, I'm debating between doing more inventory or less inventory, between pushing inventory to Amazon and paying more fees on Amazon or paying for a 3PL. And you run that through a long time period. I usually do a year, even though we're fourth quarter is right over the corner, right around the corner. Sometimes a decision that looks perfect for fourth quarter is disastrous for first, second, and third quarters. And overall, at the end of the year, I don't care if you had the best fourth quarter or not. I care that you have the best profit. So if you can have only a not so good, but an okay fourth quarter, but then Q1 and Q2 are going to be stunning, and you're going to make a ton of profit out of that. Wouldn't you rather have, at the end of 52 weeks, $300,000 net cash instead of just $150,000 net cash? I don't know about other people. For me, it's not about selling the most. I know Q4 is cash flow month, is cash flow quarter. It's when you get all this cash, but a lot of it comes at a price. You discount significantly. Your profitability tanks. Amazon doesn't discount its fees for Q4. Actually, it charges more for Q4. So you are reducing prices. Amazon is increasing prices. Your profitability for Q4, not the best. Maybe selling a bit less in Q4, but having better profitability at Q1 is better for you. I can't say. What we do is we just graph that one against the other and make an informed decision. And there are two options. One is to say, okay, whatever we forecast, that's going to happen because we're looking at two different options and trying to see which decision makes more sense. The other is to actually also add in some variability to say, okay, I know my forecast isn't going to come to life. Something else will happen. I forecasted this is going to sell well, so I have more inventory here, and this is going to sell less, so I have less inventory here. What happens if I cross my signals? What decision can I make? When do I make it? How do I make it to limit that problem, to limit that impact? That is a what if scenario analysis. And there's a lot of money sitting there.
So there's no unique approach when it comes to inventory management. In Q4, you just have to look at your own numbers, know your numbers, and then make an informed decision based on that.
Totally. Totally. I just talked to somebody whose season is in the summer. He sells summer gardening stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably not going to sell anything in Q4, even if he does discounts, even if he does this, that, and the other. Probably the best strategy for him is to have nothing in Amazon for Q4, or close to nothing. Whereas somebody else who has Christmas items that haven't sold anything for the past 2 months has to just lay it on is very, very case specific.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Do you have any message for sellers that are preparing for this Q4, something to keep in mind at all times?
Know your numbers.
Know your numbers, for sure.
The temptation of cash flow is phenomenal. And I've seen it in e-commerce, I've seen it in brick and mortar retail. When we see those numbers coming in, we forget everything. We had a perfect day yesterday. We sold everything at 70% off and we made $100,000. But at 70% off, we have no profit at all. We are actually at a loss. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we made a ton of cash, but we lost money. And I understand that need for cash because you've bought a lot of inventory. You need to pay for it. You need to sell it and pay for it, but you need to pay for it profitably. You've done a lot of work and you need to get paid. So I'm going to revert back to Robert Kiyosaki's tip. Pay yourself first.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
Take a salary. Write your salary as one of your operating expenses. Then if you have profits after that, which are actual cash flow profits, you can add to yourself a bonus. But you need to pay yourself a salary each month to make sure your business is actually doing what it needs to do. If you cannot pay yourself a salary and you cannot form a plan how to fix that in tops 12 months, start thinking of an exit strategy. The business isn't going well.
Yeah, and in this case, an exit strategy doesn't even have to be changing the business model, just changing the product. Maybe something is wrong about the product choice.
Maybe the product is wrong. If the product is selling, but you're not making a salary and profits, then it's your financial model that needs to be fixed. Maybe you're pricing too low. Maybe Amazon isn't for you. There's a lot of maybes out there that you can change.
Awesome. Orion, thank you for being my guest today. And thank you for sharing all this advice. If someone wants to contact you in the upcoming period, how can they do that?
Well, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, using my name, Orion Avidan, and I'll send you my email. You can share it in the description. It's Orion at retail-ad with a double D -venture.com. It's a bad email address, I know.
No worries.
But we'll put it in the links.
Yeah, so it's easy for everyone to use it.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, and I was happy to be your host today.
I'm always happy to come talk to you. It's so much fun.
Thank you.